Welcome to the tour of my upper elementary classroom. I call this area, I guess, kind of like the cosmic or cultural corner. On the top shelf of my biology and botany shelf, we start with kind of the largest idea, so the classification of the living world cards, and then we get into scientific naming with kingdom, phylum, class, etc. In the wicker basket there, I have six kingdoms classification, and the next shelf we start getting into plant classification. The children in those red and green folders, we have parts of a flower and parts of a leaf for the children to explore independently if they wish. Over next to that, we have our story of a leaf chart, and as we go down a little bit further into the biology and botany shelf, we start getting into smaller details with the study of plant and animal cells. The children made these really cool shrinky dinks that we made from training this year as part of our study on animal cells. At the very bottom of here, we're getting into the human body with the Great River chart, and then the vital functions of the human body in that basket. This is the history shelf, so on the shelf contains all the information and materials that the children would need to follow up with great lesson work. So we've got the clock of errors on the top with the black strip. Children can make, I believe, can make bracelets with some of the stuff that's in that box. So that's follow-up work for the first grade lesson. We keep going down. We've got creation stories, also lots of booklets on the different species of early man that the children can look at, and they're also used during lessons as well. As we go down the shelf, we get into ancient civilizations and matching cards and more details with that. So in this bucket, we have all of the charts that the children can access whenever they would like to. And I'm just going to take a little walk over to the science shelf. So this shelf here tends to change once every 2 months as we work through the different units. In my class, we have to follow the program of studies for our provincial government, so most of our science units are dictated by what the government's mandated. So right now, I keep the chemistry kit out always because that seems to be a really great point of interest for the children. The first shelf is showing materials that the children have used in light and shadow, so they're looking at what objects are opaque and what are translucent. The Christmas balls and the spoon involved an experiment on looking at the reflection that you get in a concave versus convex surface. The year sixes right now are doing studies on trees and forests, so at the bottom there are tons and tons of cards with matching that they can work on independently. The middle is a huge dendrodisc from a tree that's over 100 years old, and we were using that to look at all the things that we can tell from looking at a tree trunk. So this is another part of a big part of the science shelf. So what I always have out is work on with measurement, work with magnetism. The bottom right corner there is a electrical circuit board, and children are able to use that anytime they want. In the top right corner there are books on like science reference books, and those are there all the time. The bottom we have work on chemical elements, and that stuff is always going to be there. And whatever unit of science that we're doing, I always keep a bunch of different books from our library out so the children can get some inspiration in terms of experiments. And the next thing that I want to show is our practical life shelf. So this month we're doing a ton of work on how to properly set a dinner table. So there is usually a plate, a little plate, and a bowl, so people can learn how to set a table properly. And There's also always there's like tons of cleaning supplies. And that's what the children use for their end of the day jobs. And I'm going to take a little walk over to the language shelf. So the language shelf contains work with sentence analysis. That blue box is a bunch of poetry task cards, which have proven to be really fun in the past. We also have these pink boxes are all of the word study work that we can do. So I use those as lesson guides, but children also tend to use them independently if they want to. There's research support. And then those little popsicle sticks there are story starters and sentence starters when children need a little bit of inspiration for their creative writing. Over here is the math corner. So this first shelf has work with all the 4 basic operations. So we have operations task cards where children have to like identify almost like a mystery number. There's also multiplication and division practice flashcards. We have all of our finger charts on the shelf, and then some of the more simple, more familiar materials that the children would have used in lower L. So the bead frames, we've also the stamp game, racks and tubes, and at the bottom we have the pegboard. Our next shelf, as the math starts to get a little bit more complicated, is all work to do with fractions and decimal fractions. So we have the hierarchical board, and then also a ton of self-directed work on fractions and decimal fractions, and the children tend to really enjoy those, and they've been working through those since the start of the year. Let's see, we have our fraction plastic insets up in the top left corner. We have some tangrams for exploring equivalency. Our Skittles are behind there. Some more metal insets. And we have the cubing material box there because it really wouldn't fit anywhere else. In the bottom left corner there, that plastic thing is filled with geometry and fraction matching. So the children are expected to kind of work through those drawers at their own pace. The final shelf in the math sequencing is almost all to do with geometry, so except for the binomial and trinomial boxes, but we have our constructive triangle boxes, our geometry boxes for exploring equivalency, and then the blues, we have our geometric solids to explore volume. So I would say like the second shelf is where like the children will be familiar, and then the geometric solids, we use them in a totally different way when the children are in like year 5, 6, when we start to look at more volume. And then below on the bottom shelf we have all of our metal insets and a lot of cards on graphing. And we'll just go for a little walk over here. And this is the library shelf, and we have a huge library in the school, so children usually choose to pick books from the library, but we do have lots just in case they don't have time to go down. That's sort of like a little corner that the children seem to love working in. They often take the yoga mats out and make like a little cozy work area for themselves in there. Here would be a shot of the classroom as a whole. And that concludes the tour of my upper elementary classroom. Thank you.